Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind all logical clothing decisions and stepping right into the itchy, uncomfortable and occasionally inflatable world of Tudor England fashion. This is the era where you could tell a man's status by the size of his codpiece, where women wore collars big enough to host a small cheese platter, and where everyone was permanently about one wardrobe malfunction away from historical scandal. Before we swaddle ourselves in linen and existential dread, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this sort of gentle historical suffering. Now, dim those lights, crank up a fan for some white noise, and get comfortable. You might want to put on every layer you own, just in case sumptuary laws are suddenly enforced by your cat. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to wear a hat that weighs more than your groceries? Did anyone in Tudor England ever actually sit down in a farthingale, or did they just accept standing as a way of life? Why did people wear so much fur in a country that's damp 9 months out of 12? Was fashionable really just code for mildly dangerous and deeply impractical? Congratulations! You've just woken up in the year 1558. Queen Elizabeth is on the throne. Everyone's anxious about Spain, and your outfit is about to get weirder than a Black Friday sale at a Renaissance fair. Welcome to Tudor England. Try not to catch fire. It's sunrise in Tudor England, and you're about to attempt the medieval triathlon known as getting dressed. There's no such thing as sweatpants. Every day is layers, laces, and the looming threat of a wardrobe-induced hernia. If you thought tying your shoes was a hassle, wait until you meet the world of doublets, hose, and a complicated relationship with string. You awaken not to a gentle smartphone alarm, but to the glorious duet of distant livestock and your neighbour coughing up what might be a small shrew. The room is cold, your bed is straw, and you're already itching in places you didn't know you had. But there's no time to linger. Tudor life waits for no one, and neither does your first chore of the day, assembling yourself out of an improbable number of garments. First up, the linen shift. This is your base layer, and it's doing most of the heavy lifting in the hygiene department. Imagine a long, baggy nightgown, designed not for comfort, but as a desperate, slightly yellowing barrier between you and a woolly doom. It hasn't been washed in weeks, but hey, neither has anyone else's. On goes the shift, already slightly damp from the mysterious humidity that permeates every Tudor house. It smells like a haunted laundry basket. Next comes your hose, which, let's clear this up, are not pants. They are 2 long, separate tubes of itchy wool, one for each leg, awkwardly tied to your waist or doublet with whatever string you can find. Pulling them up is a full-body workout. If you're lucky, you only get halfway before realizing you put them on backwards. The top of your hose is open, like a fashion statement and a personal ventilation system. These things sag faster than your will to live, so you spend the morning hiking them up and pretending this is normal. Now, the doublet. This is basically the Tudor version of a fitted jacket, except it's more like a cross between body armor and a poorly designed corset. You wriggle your arms in, tug, pull, and try not to pass out as you lace yourself in tighter than the lid on a jar of medieval pickles. The doublet gives you shape, which, in Tudor times, means the broad, boxy look of someone who's prepared for both a sword fight and a small wedding under their jacket. And we haven't even gotten to the accessories. If you're a man, you may now be required by law and society's cruel whims to don the codpiece, the world's least subtle pouch. This curious textile invention is proudly displayed up front, stuffed with rags, padding, or in some cases, wishful thinking. Try not to knock anything over as you walk out the door. If you're a woman, prepare to squeeze yourself into a stiff, whaleboned bodice that defies both anatomy and physics. Then pile on petticoats, stays, and, for the especially unlucky, the farthingale, a wire-reinforced hoop skirt that ensures you can no longer fit through most Tudor doorways. Now for the laces. Everything is laced. Your sleeves, your bodice, your shoes, and sometimes your hat if you're feeling particularly festive. It takes an average Tudor approximately half an hour and 3 prayers to get fully tied in. If you're rich, you have a servant to help you. If you're poor, you just lose feeling in your hands and hope for the best. Once, finally, you are dressed, you are swaddled in wool, linen, and frustration. You are hot, itchy, and about as mobile as a sofa. You stand in your doorway, ready to face the day, knowing that everything you are wearing is designed less for comfort and more to prove that you own more fabric than your neighbor. And just like that, you're dressed. Sort of. You haven't even put on your hat yet, but that's a whole other battle. In Tudor England, getting dressed isn't just a routine, it's an act of athletic endurance, mild self-endangerment, and sheer, stubborn optimism. And if you manage to do it every morning without losing a shoe or your will to live, congratulations, you're ready for whatever the day, and the weather, and the local laws throws at you. You may not be comfortable, but you are, at the very least, historically accurate. Meet the ruff, a collar so vast it has its own weather system. You don't put it on so much as assemble it. Each pleat is starched to architectural perfection, and your head now floats in a sea of linen. Try to eat soup, I dare you. Now, if you're imagining a crisp shirt collar or a cozy scarf, please, lower your expectations. The Tudor ruff is not here for comfort. It's here for drama. Stiff, circular, and aggressively frilly, a ruff is like wearing a lacy halo that's also somehow a personal cage. Forget necklaces. Forget scarves. The ruff has claimed your neck and a sizable chunk of your peripheral vision. It's less of an accessory, more of a soft architectural wonder. Think the world's fluffiest tire, if that tire was designed by someone with a grudge against soup. Putting one on is an adventure in engineering. You start with lengths of fine linen, often yards and yards of it. A servant, or if you're unlucky, you carefully pleats the fabric into tiny, even folds. These are then heavily starched, dried, and, if you're rich, sometimes pressed with a heated goffering iron for that extra crisp look. It's a little like trying to pleat a lasagna noodle and then make it hold its shape for 8 hours. The resulting creation is starched so stiff that it could, in a pinch, double as a frisbee. And oh, the starch. Starch is to the ruff what caffeine is to a 21st century office worker, absolutely necessary and slightly hazardous. If you run out, your ruff collapses into a limp, accusatory noodle. If you use too much, you risk slicing open your chin or leaving a chalky dust trail wherever you go. Starching a ruff was a weekly, sometimes daily, ritual, and it required so much time, effort, and combustible materials that it's a wonder half the Tudor aristocracy didn't simply go up in flames while getting dressed. Actually, some did, but that's another story. Wearing the ruff is its own sport. Walking through a doorway becomes a calculated risk. Looking down is strictly forbidden, unless you want to blind yourself with linen and your own bad decisions. If you drop anything on the floor, it's dead to you now. Nodding, turning your head, or, God forbid, hugging someone, all become high-stakes maneuvers. If you're feeling romantic, just know passionate necking is out of the question, and the only thing getting caressed tonight is starched fabric. Dining? That's for the brave. Imagine trying to eat a bowl of pottage with a foamy, fragile donut glued to your neck. Soup is now an extreme sport, requiring either a drinking straw or the ability to angle your face just right while keeping a 6-inch buffer zone between your chin and the table. Drop a crumb, and it'll live forever in the folds of your ruff, a hidden snack for later, or possibly a home for a small family of beetles. And let's not forget the social stakes. The bigger the ruff, the higher your status. At least until Elizabethan lawmakers decided enough was enough and started regulating collar width by statute. Too small and you look like a failed choir boy. Too big and you risk looking like the town's fanciest mushroom. Somewhere in the middle is the sweet spot where people both respect your wealth and can still recognize your face. Of course, ruffs didn't last forever. Fashion moved on to lower, broader collars, and the world breathed a collective sigh of relief. But for decades, the ruff reigned supreme, giving us some of the most recognizable and ridiculous portraits in British history. So the next time you fasten a shirt button or adjust your scarf, take a moment to appreciate the simple pleasure of not living with a small, starched cloud glued to your head. Because in Tudor England, if you didn't have a ruff, you simply weren't living, or at the very least you weren't suffering properly. You slip into your doublet, stuff yourself into hose, and, oh yes, the codpiece, a pouch so unnecessary it can only be explained as a collective social experiment. Is it a pocket? Is it armour? Is it a cry for help? Let's start with the doublet. This is the centrepiece of Tudor menswear, a snug, padded jacket that's somewhere between a waistcoat and a high-security vest. Forget breathability or movement. The doublet is about structure. Imagine you're being hugged constantly by an aggressive mattress, and you'll have the general idea. Some doublets are so thickly stuffed you could take a crossbow bolt to the chest and only feel slightly insulted. Padding is everything. The more layers, the better. It wasn't about warmth. It was about showing off how much stuffing you could afford. The richer the man, the thicker the doublet, and the more he waddled like a sofa with opinions. Over this, you'll lace your hose, essentially a pair of glorified, aggressively optimistic tights. Tudor hose are what you get when you cross yoga pants with medieval optimism and subtract any notion of comfort or privacy. They're made of wool or heavy linen, sometimes joined at the top like a pair of full-length medieval leggings, sometimes separate and tied to your doublet by a nightmare's worth of string. If you're picturing a grown man desperately yanking at his waistband to keep his tights from sagging, you're not wrong. Every Tudor morning began with a minor existential crisis about which way the seams should face. But the real headliner here is the codpiece. There's no getting around it. The codpiece is the Kardashian of Tudor menswear, unnecessary, ever-present, and somehow both fascinating and alarming. Officially, it's a padded, sometimes armoured pouch that ties or buttons over your most sensitive real estate. Why? Historians have tried for centuries to explain it. Was it practical? Sometimes, after all, hose were basically footed tights, and a little flap for bathroom breaks wasn't the worst idea. But as with all things Tudor, it escalated quickly. Soon codpieces were quilted, embroidered, bejewelled, and sometimes large enough to require planning permission from the local magistrate. The codpiece became a canvas for competitive masculinity. The bigger, the better. If your codpiece could double as a small change purse, congratulations, you were a commoner. If it looked like you might be smuggling a loaf of bread, now you were getting somewhere. Some were shaped, stuffed, and even perfumed. Some were built like tiny fortresses, ready for battle. You could keep a handkerchief in there, maybe a note from a secret admirer. In some circles, rumours swirled that the codpiece started as a way to hide the medicinal bandages used to treat, let's just say, courtly diseases. From there, the entire male population just ran with it. Of course, walking in public now involved a whole new set of rules. Sitting down became an exercise in geometry and modesty. Dancing at court required a sense of rhythm and the ability to keep your codpiece from launching itself into the string section. And heaven help you if you drop something. The last thing you want is to bend at the waist and announce your social aspirations to the entire banquet hall. But Tudor men endured all this for the sake of fashion and ego. The doublet gave you the boxy silhouette of a man who never skipped stuffing day. The hose showcased your well-turned calves, or at least made you believe you had them. And the codpiece? That was your business card, your conversation starter, your wearable warning label that said, I have money, status, and possibly a deep need for validation. And then, as with all things, fashion changed. The codpiece shrank, the doublet slimmed down, hose eventually made way for breeches, and a nation quietly exhaled. But for a few glorious decades, the male wardrobe was a chaotic battlefield of pride, padding, and questionable pouches. So, next time you zip up your jeans or complain about tight pants, just remember, you've never had to explain a jewel-encrusted codpiece to your laundry service. That's progress. The farthingale is your new best friend, or worst enemy. A skirt so wide, you need special doorways. Sitting is optional. Knocking over furniture is not. Let's take a step back and marvel. The farthingale isn't so much an article of clothing as it is a wearable piece of architecture. If you're picturing a regular skirt, please recalibrate. The farthingale is a vast, hoop-supported construction, originally designed in Spain but embraced by the English with a kind of competitive enthusiasm that can only be described as, how much space can one woman occupy before becoming a fire hazard? Here's how it works. Imagine putting on your linen shift and petticoats, and then, instead of simply reaching for a skirt, you hoist up a massive conical contraption, stiffened with whalebone, willow, or sometimes even metal, and step into it like you're joining the world's slowest circus act. Over this skeleton goes yards of fabric, all stitched and pleated into oblivion, making your lower half about 3 times its natural size. You don't so much walk as glide ominously, blocking out the light and possibly trapping small pets underneath. Getting through a doorway now becomes a military exercise. Standard Tudor doors were not built with farthingales in mind. Every entrance and exit is accompanied by the soft but persistent scraping of hoop against wood, and every host's face fills with terror when you approach the good furniture. If the farthingale catches on a doorframe, the whole room may pause to watch you wiggle, pivot, and pray you don't take half the wainscoting with you, and God help you if you have to use the stairs. Farthingales and spiral staircases are mortal enemies, and gravity is always lurking, waiting for its next slapstick victim. Now, let's talk about sitting, which is not so much an activity as an ordeal. You don't just sit in a farthingale, you negotiate. It's less like taking a seat and more like parallel parking with blindfolds on. The trick is to lower yourself, inch by inch, onto the very edge of a bench, holding your skirts out so the hoops don't tilt and expose everything your mother told you never to show. Lean back too far, and the whole contraption tips up, pitching you forward into your neighbour's lap or launching your plate of pottage across the table. Standing becomes the default setting for most social events. If you've ever wondered why portraits of Tudor ladies show them looking slightly annoyed, this is probably why. The farthingale's real purpose, of course, was status. The wider your skirt, the richer you probably were, or at least the more willing you were to endure mild humiliation for the sake of fashion. Farthingales demanded expensive fabric and extra labour, so if you could pull one off, it meant you'd truly made it. It was a rolling billboard for wealth and modesty, keeping admirers and commoners at a respectable distance and reducing any threat of unwanted physical contact to almost zero. Personal space, enforced by whalebone. But this was not without hazards. The wider the skirt, the greater the risk of disaster. Farthingales knocked over candles, spilled drinks, and occasionally trapped the wearer in awkward corners for entire afternoons. There are records of ladies getting stuck in church pews, wedged into coaches, or nearly set ablaze at particularly festive banquets. One false move and you're less of a socialite, more of a cautionary tale. Small dogs lived in constant peril. On the bright side, the farthingale did provide a certain kind of freedom, if not of movement, then of privacy. With all that fabric you could hide snacks, notes, or even a small purse under your skirts, far from prying eyes and light fingers. In a world with no handbags, your hoop skirt was the original tote. So next time you're frustrated by a puffy winter coat or a crowded subway, remember, in Tudor England, one bad turn in a farthingale and you might take out a tapestry, a table, and 3 dinner guests in one go. Portable prison? Maybe. But at least you'll never complain about narrow hallways again. In Tudor England, what you wore wasn't just a matter of taste, it was law. Wear the wrong colour or fabric, and you might as well turn yourself into the style police. Social mobility, not in velvet. Let's set the scene. It's a brisk morning, and you're getting dressed, nervously, because in the great game of Tudor fashion, it's not enough to worry if your ruff is crisp or your doublet stuffed. You also need to make sure you're not accidentally committing a felony with your socks. The government, never one to pass up an opportunity to meddle, has helpfully provided a list of clothing do's and don'ts. These are the sumptuary laws. A multi-page bureaucratic fever dream detailing who can wear what, based on their social rank, job, and likelihood of ever being invited to court. Want to wear silk? Not unless you're nobility, clergy, or have a purse so heavy it has its own gravitational pull. Crimson velvet? Off limits unless you're in the upper crust or have the right royal connections. Fur? That's a whole taxonomy of restriction. Ermine for the king, fox or otter for the gentry, and rabbit fur for everyone else, assuming you can catch one. Even your shoelaces are scrutinized. Gold or silver thread is strictly for those who are at least a knight, preferably with land, a castle, and a small army of increasingly nervous tenants. It's not just fabrics. Colours are tightly policed too. Purple is so exclusive it may as well have been declared a controlled substance. Only royalty and the highest nobles may drape themselves in it. Red is for the rich, blue for respectable townsfolk, and brown for, well, the people who make sure everyone else's clothes get made. Even buttons are suspicious. Metal ones for the elite, cloth-covered for everyone else. If you ever get nostalgic for high school dress codes, just imagine being fined for your choice of hat. Why all this obsession with clothing laws? Partly it's about maintaining order. If the baker starts dressing like a baron, the universe collapses, or so the authorities fear. How would you know who to bow to in the street, or whose muddy boots you're supposed to clean, if everyone is wandering around in the same fancy hose? The sumptuary laws make sure the rich stay visibly rich, and the poor remain, well, reliably brown. But it's not just about hierarchy, it's also about anxiety. England is going through social changes, new money is cropping up, old families are feeling the pinch, and the monarch is determined to keep everything looking proper from a safe distance. If you can't police ambition, at least you can police fabric choices. The result is a society where a well-meaning tailor can land you in court, and wearing your cousin's hand-me-downs could be the start of a legal drama. And let's talk about enforcement. You'd think no one would care, but you'd be wrong. There are actual officials, wardens, and informers whose job it is to spot offenders. If you're caught in illegal velvet, you might be fined, shamed, or even have your clothes seized on the spot. Imagine explaining to your boss that you're late because the city confiscated your breeches. This leads to all sorts of sneaky behavior. Some people dye cheaper cloth to mimic forbidden colors, hoping no one will look too closely. Others stitch fancy linings into plain garments, keeping their luxury hidden like a guilty secret. In towns, gossip is a blood sport. The neighbor who spots your unauthorized silk sleeves will absolutely report you, especially if you didn't invite her to your last turnip soup night. Of course, the truly wealthy and powerful find ways around the rules. Bribes, exemptions, and royal favors mean that some people manage to swan about in whatever they please, while the rest of society squints suspiciously at each other's cuffs. So the next time you complain about uncomfortable work attire or the tyranny of business casual, be grateful no one's checking your socks for contraband satin. In Tudor England, fashion wasn't just about looking good. It was about survival, dodging fines, avoiding scandal, and remembering always that your clothes say everything about who you are and who you're never allowed to be. Every Tudor wardrobe begins with linen, the undergarment for the ages. Layered with wool and maybe fur, you're either boiling, freezing, or both. The only thing truly waterproof is your disappointment. Let's start with the basics. Linen is your first line of defense. A long, baggy shirt or shift that touches every inch of skin and, in theory, soaks up the worst of what you put your body through. It's meant to be washed often, but in Tudor England, often is a generous word. Most days your linen shift is closer to grey than white, and smells somewhere between fresh hay and haunted cellar. Still, compared to what comes next, it's practically spa-wear. On top of your linen, you pile on wool, and not the fluffy, soft, hand-knit, Instagrammable kind. Tudor wool is thick, rough, and about as forgiving as a tax collector with a toothache. Wool tunics, wool cloaks, woolen hose, you are swaddled in the stuff. It keeps out the wind, sort of. It keeps in the heat, sometimes. It also keeps in the moisture, sweat, and the persistent sensation that you are being gently exfoliated by an army of determined hedgehogs. The reason for all this layering is simple. England is damp. The kind of damp that seeps into your bones, your boots, and inevitably, your mood. There is no central heating. The concept of dry is reserved for dreams and royal palaces. Outside, it's always raining, or about to rain, or just finished raining, and is now plotting a comeback. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of smoke, old socks, and that distinctive Tudor aroma, mildew mixed with resignation. If you're lucky and rich, you might add a layer of fur, sable, mink, or even squirrel if your connections are more woodland than royal. The fur trim isn't just for show. It's an attempt to block the endless drafts sneaking through every gap in your clothing and your house. On the downside, fur also offers sanctuary to every flea within a 2-mile radius, turning you into a 5-star pest resort. The biggest challenge? Staying dry. Wool, for all its virtues, is about as waterproof as a colander. The moment you step outside, the damp finds you. Rain, fog, and suspicious puddles wage constant war on your feet. There are no umbrellas, only cloaks, vast, heavy woolen blankets that cover you like a soggy superhero cape. If it rains hard, the best you can hope for is to be equally wet everywhere, which at least makes the suffering consistent. Then there's laundry day, which is less a routine and more a heroic feat. Washing linen means hauling buckets of water from a stream or well, boiling it over an open fire, and scrubbing fabric with homemade lye soap or, if times are tough, just sand and prayer. Wool is rarely washed. It's too heavy, too expensive, and takes longer to dry than a medieval lawsuit. Instead, you air it out, shake it, and hope the wind carries off anything alive. As the seasons change, your layers change too, but only slightly. In winter, you add more wool until you resemble a disgruntled sheep. In summer, you wear the same clothes but sweat more. There is no summer collection. There's just a permanent collection of stains and the hope that a breeze might find you on its way to someone more important. Of course, all this layering comes with side effects. Rashes, chafing, and the delightful experience of having your clothes freeze to your skin are just part of the deal. And yet, compared to the alternative, exposure, hypothermia, or being mistaken for a peasant, most Tudors decide the itching is worth it. So next time you throw on a hoodie or complain about the humidity, remember, in Tudor England, comfort is a myth, dryness is a memory, and your greatest hope is to end the day only mildly damp and a little less itchy than yesterday. If you succeed, you've conquered the weather better than most, and your disappointment can take the night off. Real hair? Optional. Fake hair? Strongly encouraged, especially if you're losing it. Enter the wig, a glorious rat's nest of ambition, animal fat, and last month's gossip. Tudor England is a place where your social standing can live or die by what's happening, or not happening, on your scalp. Forget shampoo and conditioner. Those are centuries away. Here, your options are A. Your own hair, thin and greying from stress, lice, or chronic plague, adjacent anxiety, or B. Someone else's hair, woven, glued, and pinned until you resemble a startled sheep with a taste for fashion. The rise of the wig is both practical and absurd. If you're losing your hair, which, let's face it, most Tudor adults are, thanks to malnutrition, illness, and hats that double as small ovens, you've got to compensate. The answer? Pile on a wig and pretend nothing happened. The most popular wigs are crafted from human hair, but if you're thrifty, you might opt for horsehair, goat hair, or anything else you can comb into submission. Somewhere out there is a very confused goat, wondering why half the court is wearing its winter coat. The process of donning a wig is not for the faint of heart. First, you grease your natural hair down with animal fat or a homemade pomade of beeswax, lard and regret. This not only tames your hair but also provides a nourishing environment for whatever creatures may be living up there. Next comes the wig, a hefty, powdered creation that's pinned and tied into place with a level of commitment usually reserved for shipbuilding. There's nothing subtle about it. Every step, you're quietly worried the whole structure will slip sideways and reveal your shame. But it's a risk you're willing to take for the sake of fashion and plausible deniability. If you're wealthy or aspiring to be, your wig is less about realism and more about spectacle. Styles range from modest curls to elaborate towers of ringlets, sometimes so large that small birds could nest in the back and no one would notice. Queen Elizabeth herself set the tone with her flame-red, meticulously curled wigs, a look that whispered, "Yes, my hair is entirely made up, but so is my patience for your nonsense." Powdered wigs are also the rage. Powder, you ask? Yes. It comes in white, grey, or if you're feeling adventurous, pale blue or lavender. The powder is made from starch, ground bones, or flour, whatever's handy and vaguely absorbent. The idea is to cover the smell of the wig and your own head underneath. The result: every time you remove your wig, a small cloud erupts, like a baking disaster or the world's saddest magic trick. It's fashion, but also fumigation. Of course, wigs have their hazards. They attract lice like a hay bale at a goat convention. Removing them after a long day means peeling off a layer of heat, sweat, and court intrigue. Wig maintenance is a full-time job. There are specialists for cleaning, curling, and repairing these masterpieces, which is necessary because the average Tudor's idea of a wash involves rainwater, maybe a handful of rosemary, and a whispered apology to whatever lives inside their hat box. And for the less fortunate, those who can't afford a proper wig, there's always the hat trick. Literally, just plop a hat on your thinning hair and hope for cloudy weather. If you're especially bold, you can try to fashion your own wig from scraps, but be prepared for people to stare, and possibly for your dog to mistake your head for an escaped squirrel. Still, a well-chosen wig is the difference between being taken seriously and being quietly pitied at the next banquet. It's the original Tudor life hack. Look better, age slower, and conceal a host of questionable decisions, all in one fluffy, ambitious bundle. So the next time you're annoyed by a bad hair day, remember, in Tudor England, hair today, gone tomorrow, was both a threat and a fashion opportunity. Shoes are pointy, flat, and never quite the same size as your feet. They're not designed for walking. They're designed to tell people you're not a peasant, which, in Tudor England, is basically the same thing as comfort. Let's start with the basics. Tudor shoes are not, in any sense, the ancestors of your favorite sneakers. Comfort technology in the 1500s meant the cobbler remembered to line your shoes with at least one layer of something softer than oak bark. Each pair is lovingly crafted from stiff, untreated leather and designed to fit someone, somewhere, sometime, just not you, not today, and definitely not both feet at once. If you have a matching pair, congratulations, you're already one step ahead of half the kingdom. For the fashion-forward, pointy toes are all the rage. The longer and more ridiculous, the better. Some noblemen's shoes are so extravagantly extended that entering a room is less about walking and more about strategic navigation. Bump a chair, trip over your own toes, or get caught in a muddy street, and suddenly you're the main attraction at the impromptu slapstick festival that is Tudor daily life. If you're wealthy, you might even have your shoes stuffed to hold their shape, which is great for appearances but less great for circulation. There's nothing quite like cutting off blood flow to the toes to show you're above manual labor. For women, shoes are a little less pointy but equally unforgiving. Slippers and flat shoes are standard, often dyed in bright colors or embroidered, assuming you're in the gentry and can afford such luxuries. The sole is thin, barely more than a suggestion. Walking across cobbles is a medieval reflexology experience. Walking through mud is a direct ticket to a cold, wet and regret-filled afternoon. There is no arch support, no cushioning, and absolutely no waterproofing. If you want to know what it feels like, just walk barefoot across a gravel driveway, then ask someone to occasionally drop a beetle in your shoe for historical accuracy. And don't get too attached to the idea of left and right shoes. Most Tudor shoes are made on straight lasts, meaning there's no real difference between a left and a right. They'll eventually mold to your feet, or more accurately, your feet will give up and mold themselves to the shoe. This is not a partnership. It's a long, slow war of attrition. And the shoes always win. If you're really aiming for social mobility, you'll need to accessorize your footwear. Embellished buckles, slashed leather, or even bells. Nothing says I have more money than sense like a pair of shoes that makes you sound like you're announcing yourself at every step. Some shoes are so finely made and fragile that wearing them outside is basically forbidden. These are show shoes, meant for indoor strutting only. If you accidentally step outside, you'll ruin them faster than you can say, "These cost half my annual income." Now, what about bad weather? This is England, so it's raining, always. Shoes soak through instantly, swelling and shrinking unpredictably. Wet leather hardens and shrinks, turning your feet into two medieval beef jerky sticks. To cope, some people use pattens, wooden or metal platforms strapped to the bottoms of shoes, elevating you above the filth. These clunky accessories are Tudor England's answer to platform heels, but instead of looking stylish, you look like you're trying not to drown in your own front yard. And yes, people trip over these all the time. It's not a question of if, but when. For peasants, it's barefoot or bust. Shoes are expensive and reserved for Sundays, feast days, or, if you're lucky, your own wedding. Most of the time, your feet are so toughened by the elements that you could probably stomp on a hedgehog and both of you would walk away unharmed. So, next time you slip on your trainers or sigh over a new pair of loafers, just remember, in Tudor England, shoes weren't about comfort, practicality, or support. They were a public declaration of how much you were willing to suffer for status. And if you managed to walk a mile in those shoes, you truly earned every blister. No outfit is complete without a hat, cap, or hood. The taller, fluffier, or more bejeweled, the better. Some hats are so wide they require a separate bus ticket. In Tudor England, hats are not just accessories, they're statements. Forget about subtle beanies or your favorite old baseball cap. Here, headwear is as essential as your reputation. Step outside hatless, and you might as well announce to the world that you've given up on society, ambition, and perhaps life itself. A bare head is practically a scandal unless you're a small child, a monk, or the victim of a very recent haircut. Let's start with the men. The basic cap is the flat cap, a squishy wool pancake that perches on your head, signalling that you're either a respectable tradesman or, possibly, an off-duty Shakespeare. For those with greater ambitions, or just more disposable income, the fashion escalates quickly. There's the bonnet, round, soft, and often edged in fur. The taller the hat, the more people have to look up to you, literally. By the late Tudor period, the hat hierarchy includes extravagant felt hats that could double as bird baths, towering structures adorned with feathers, ribbons, and, if you're really lucky, a large jeweled brooch designed to blind oncoming traffic. Now, on to the feathers. Ostrich plumes are particularly prized. A single feather, properly displayed, can be the difference between looking like a nobleman and looking like someone who's been mugged by a goose. More feathers mean more status, or possibly just more ambition than common sense. In a room full of courtiers, you'll hear a gentle whoosh as men turn their heads and their feathered hats sweep the air like the world's slowest parade float. For women, the situation is even more layered. Start with a coif, a linen cap that hugs the head tightly, making sure that not a single strand of hair escapes and offends the sensibilities of passing bishops. Over the coif comes the French hood, a curved, padded headband draped in velvet and lined with pearls, as if your forehead were a royal carriage. There's also the gable hood, which turns your head into a small, pointy-roofed house, complete with stiffened wings that make looking sideways an extreme sport. If you're particularly fashionable, you might top all this with a billement, a decorative strip of jewels and embroidery perched on the edge of your hood. Not only does this provide extra sparkle, but it's also a handy distraction if you're ever caught napping during a sermon. Just tilt your head and let the sunlight do the work. Of course, the true test of Tudor hat wearing is endurance. Every layer traps heat, and soon you're sweating like a bakery on Christmas Eve. The phrase cool head has not yet been invented. Summer is a season of suffering. Every grand hat is a personal greenhouse, and every feather is a potential fan for someone sitting behind you in church. It's said that, during one especially hot summer, half the court nearly fainted under the combined weight of velvet, jewels, and an unspoken agreement not to remove anything, ever. But headwear isn't all about misery. It's also about defense. A good hat can shield your eyes from the sun, your hair from the lice of strangers, and your secrets from the prying eyes of rivals. Tilt it just right, and you can signal everything from "I am not listening to please refill my wine." And let's not forget the ceremonial hats, crowns, coronets, and the bishop's mitre, reserved for those rare moments when you absolutely positively need everyone to know you're in charge, or at least that you own more gold thread than the rest of the block combined. So next time you complain about helmet hair or debate the wisdom of a woolly hat in July, just remember, in Tudor England, sweating under an entire haberdashery is not just fashion. It's survival, status, and sometimes the best excuse for not hearing what anyone else is saying. If your head isn't sweating, you're simply not trying hard enough. Rings on every finger, chains over every surface, and enough brooches to arm a small militia. It's not accessorizing, it's self-defense. In Tudor England, jewelry is not just an accent, it's a declaration of war on taste, moderation, and occasionally the structural integrity of your clothing. If you can see your own skin, you're doing it wrong. Subtlety is for people who can't afford emeralds the size of pigeon eggs, and the Tudor elite are determined to blind everyone within a 3-foot radius. Forget less is more. The motto here is, can I add a sapphire to this? And what about 6? Let's start with rings. Why stop at 1 per hand when you can have 3 per finger? Rings are everywhere. Gold, silver, set with rubies, pearls, diamonds, or the occasional oddly shaped, semi-precious stone that might just be a bit of coloured glass. Each finger is a billboard of status and anxiety. Forget handshakes. If you even tried, someone would probably lose an eye or at least snag a sleeve. You could almost use your knuckles as a weapon. One polite wave and you could stun a small rabbit. But rings are just the opening act. Chains and necklaces are draped over every available surface, layered thick enough to make a medieval rapper proud. The more chains, the wealthier the wearer, or at least the more likely they are to set off metal detectors, if such things existed. Heavy gold chains are a symbol of power, office, or, in some cases, your ability to survive carrying 10 pounds of precious metal around your neck all day. If you manage not to slouch by the afternoon, congratulations. You have excellent posture or have simply gone numb. Brooches, Tudor brooches, are not for the faint of heart. They pin, they sparkle, they hold your cloak together with the determination of a professional wrestler. Some are shaped like swords, flowers, or mythical beasts. Many are so elaborate that you'd need a small instruction manual just to attach one. The most ambitious designs double as lockets, perfume holders, or even secret message compartments. A handy option if your main hobby is courtly intrigue or if you just want to keep a snack on hand for emergencies. Earrings are technically for women, but this is Tudor England, so rules are just guidelines. Pearls dangle, gold hoops swing, and if you're really aiming for envy, you'll wear something so valuable and heavy that you risk being gently pulled sideways by gravity. Ears are for decoration and for showing everyone that you have, in fact, never had to do manual labour. Let's not forget the jewelled belts, chains, again, of course, studded with gems and designed to hold everything from daggers to a particularly lucky handkerchief. Some are so weighty that it's a wonder anyone can walk, let alone dance. And don't even get started on hair accessories. Jeweled combs, pins and nets, all layered atop your possibly fake hair, threatening to collapse at the slightest breeze. And naturally, all this display is about more than just looking good. It's about broadcasting your social status to the world. Are you wealthy enough to wear a necklace with a gemstone bigger than your neighbor's entire dinner service? Do you have enough gold chains to qualify as a small ship's anchor? Jewelry isn't just fashion, it's proof that you've made it, that you belong at court, and that you could buy your way out of most minor crimes, or at least bribe the local bailiff. Of course, there are risks. Wearing this much bling is an open invitation to thieves, jealous rivals, or the occasional doorframe that just wasn't built with 3 layers of brooches in mind. There's also the danger of being mistaken for a Christmas tree, especially if you're attending a holiday feast and the lighting is particularly festive. So next time you slip on a modest ring or a delicate necklace, spare a thought for the Tudors, clinking and jingling their way through history, armed to the teeth with gemstones and good intentions. Because in this era, subtlety has most definitely left the building and slammed the door behind it. Pockets haven't been invented yet, so you attach everything, keys, knives, purses, to your belt. Walking is a musical experience. Welcome to Tudor England, where every day is a test of your ability to accessorize with the enthusiasm of a medieval magpie. Modern folks complain when their jeans have fake pockets. Tudor folk don't have the luxury of even pretending. Instead, you transform your waist into a storage solution that's equal parts tool belt, wind chime, and wearable obstacle course. Let's start with the basics. Belts. Not the slim, tasteful kind. A Tudor belt is thick leather, strong enough to tow a cart or, in a pinch, restrain a rowdy goose. It's the one thing standing between you and a personal avalanche of dropped possessions. You hang things from it with strings, cords, and hope, anything to keep daily essentials within reach. A purse dangles on one side, a knife sheath on the other, and if you're wealthy, maybe even a second pouch for all the small change you need to bribe your way past sumptuary laws. Keys are the Tudor jingle bells. If you own property, run a household, or have anything to lock, you'll be hauling around a ring of iron keys heavy enough to double as self-defense. Each step is punctuated by a cheerful clank. Forget sneaking around the house, everyone knows exactly where you are, which is probably why Tudor thieves invested so much time in learning how to walk like cats. Knives aren't optional. Even the most fashion-conscious lady wouldn't be caught dead without a utility knife, tucked right beside her embroidered coin pouch. It's less about violence, more about survival, slicing bread, cutting thread, or fending off an aggressive hunk of Tudor cheese. For the gentry, the knife might be silver, but it's still ready for action, and the more decorative, the more likely it is to catch on your own skirt when you try to sit down. And let's talk about purses. In a world without pockets, a purse is life. Hung from your belt or wrist, it's stuffed with coins, handkerchiefs, and the secret notes you hope your rival never finds. The wealthier you are, the fancier your purse. Velvet, silk, embroidered with your family crest. Or, if you're truly ambitious, decorated with enough pearls to bankrupt a minor noble. Some purses have secret compartments, perfect for hiding forbidden love letters, shopping lists, or that emergency supply of candied ginger you need to survive another round of Tudor banquet food. If you're a woman, things get even more interesting. Instead of pockets, you rely on a system of hanging pockets, little fabric bags tied around your waist, tucked under your outer petticoats. Accessing them means a complicated series of contortions in public, a feat of discretion that makes reaching into your own clothes look suspicious at best and indecent at worst. Excuse me, I just need to fish out a turnip from somewhere near my knee. Smooth. Men have it a little easier, but only because their doublets and hose are designed with the practical storage capacity of a breadstick, so everything hangs outside. Writing implements, combs, gloves, even the occasional pomander. A scented ball meant to mask the reality of sharing public space with a nation of infrequent bathers. If you've ever wondered what inspired the Swiss Army knife, just look at a well-outfitted Tudor gentleman, bristling with accessories, ready for anything, and sounding like a one-man percussion band. Naturally, all this clanking and dangling is a hazard. You get caught on doorknobs, your purse snags on furniture, your keys leave mysterious bruises on your shins. Try running for the bus, well, the ox cart, while your entire personal inventory ricochets around your legs. So next time you shove your phone, wallet, and half a sandwich into your pockets, spare a grateful thought for the Tudors. They carried their lives on their belts, announced their arrival everywhere they went, and learned to live without the simple joy of shoving cold hands into a warm pocket. Because in Tudor England, the closest thing to a pocket was a purse you could never quite reach, unless you were brave, limber, and had absolutely no sense of shame. Bathing is optional, but masking your scent is not. Sprigs of herbs, pomanders, and all the rosewater you can stomach. It's less fresh and more floral camouflage. Let's set the scene. You're a Tudor noble, surrounded by the heavy scents of damp wool, old leather, and the faint but persistent reminder that the last time you bathed, Henry VIII still had all his wives. Bathing is a production. Hot water must be fetched, heated, and carried upstairs, all so you can sit in a wooden tub and ponder life's greatest questions, like, is that smell me? And will the cat jump in again? For most, this level of hygiene is a quarterly event, maybe monthly if you're showing off. So what's a respectably aromatic Tudor to do? Simple. Enter the world of scent. Masking, where the goal isn't to remove odour, but to declare war on it, armed with flowers, herbs, and an optimism that borders on delusion. Forget soap, it's a luxury, and not widely available unless you're wealthy or have the patience to make it yourself. Instead, you raid the garden, the spice chest, and anything that grows, crushes, or can be boiled into submission. Rosewater is the Swiss Army knife of Tudor personal care. Used as a rinse, a wash, and a general-purpose dousing, it covers a multitude of sins. Sometimes literally. Fancy a shower? Just splash yourself with rosewater until you resemble a wilting bridal bouquet. Lavender is another favourite, tucked into sleeves, sewn into collars, or crushed underfoot in the vain hope it will overpower the reek of humanity. For the especially ambitious, there's the pomander, a metal or wooden ball filled with a potent mixture of herbs, spices, and sometimes wax. You dangle it from your belt, clutch it in church, or hold it under your nose when passing through a crowd. It's both a scent delivery system and a medieval air freshener, like carrying around your own personal plug-in diffuser. Bonus. The pomander is also rumoured to ward off plague, which makes it the hand sanitizer of its time, only more fragrant and twice as superstitious. Cinnamon, cloves, rosemary and mint all have starring roles in the Tudor smellscape. Some people chew parsley to freshen their breath, although it's unclear if it works or just gives you green teeth and false hope. Others tuck sachets of dried herbs into their underclothes, creating a sort of walking salad that may confuse goats and nearby chefs. If you're lucky, the prevailing aroma is pleasantly herbal. If you're not, it's sweaty garden on a humid day. Let's not forget the flowers, violets, marigolds, and when desperation strikes, handfuls of whatever looks and smells halfway decent. These get crammed into hats, woven into hair, or carried in posy bouquets to sniff during particularly pungent public events. Royalty, ever trend-setting, will go all out. Queen Elizabeth I was known to bathe in perfumed water, on occasion, and douse herself in so many floral scents that standing downwind was a risk for bees and anyone with allergies. And then, of course, there's smoke. Burning incense or aromatic wood is a household hack for making your home and yourself seem cleaner than reality allows. A smoky room means no one can tell if the odour is you, the dog, or the leftover eel pie fermenting on the table. Of course, There are risks to all this olfactory innovation. Combine too many herbs, and you might smell like a spiced ham. Use too much rosewater, and you become a mobile dessert. Drop your pomander and, well, hope nobody steps on it, because nothing says awkward like a room full of nobles sneezing in unison. So next time you spritz perfume or light a scented candle, remember the Tudors, masters of the art of smelling like anything but themselves. In a world where fresh was a fantasy, the best you could do was embrace the chaos, mix your florals, and hope that the only thing overpowering your scent was your sense of style. For the upper crust, nothing says good evening like a little chainmail under your jacket. Who says you can't mix business, pleasure, and a healthy fear of assassination? In Tudor England, high society isn't just about gold buttons and jeweled cuffs. It's also about personal survival. When every banquet could double as a plot twist, and the line between friend and enemy is thinner than a gossamer ruff, a touch of armor is the smart accessory for anyone with social ambition and a lingering sense of self-preservation. Let's set the scene. The invitations are out, the tapestries have been aired, and the smell of roasted venison is wafting through the hall. Everyone is dressed to impress, or at least to intimidate. And beneath the velvets, brocades, and fur-trimmed cloaks, more than a few guests have added an extra layer. A shirt of fine chainmail, a steel gorget, or even a discreet dagger tucked into a boot. After all, this is Tudor England, where last week's guest of honor could be this week's unfortunate incident. Armor isn't reserved for the battlefield. The smart nobleman knows that court is as much a war zone as any muddy field. Under your doublet, you might wear a sleek mail shirt, lighter and more flexible than the heavy stuff. But just as ready for action should someone decide your presence at dinner is an affront to their ambitions. Ladies aren't exempt either. A little stiffened bodice or decorative dagger at the hip is just good planning. After all, you never know when you'll need to parry gossip, or, actual swords. Of course, the trick is to blend protection with panache. Clanking openly into a ballroom is a faux pas. Subtlety is everything. Some nobles commission armourers to craft custom pieces that are not just functional, but fashionable. Engraved breastplates with gilded edges, mail so fine it passes as heavy embroidery, and decorative cuffs that double as knuckle dusters. It's like wearing a tuxedo that just happens to be stab-proof. There's even a thriving black market for concealed armour. Tailors and smiths work together to hide steel between layers of fabric, producing doublets that feel suspiciously heavy but look absolutely court-ready. The phrase, "dressed to kill," takes on a very literal meaning. Sometimes, the real fashion statement is surviving the evening with all your vital organs unperforated. And let's not forget the weaponry. Swords are everywhere at court, strapped to hips and rattling against the flagstones. A knife or two tucked into your boots is de rigueur, more useful for slicing venison than defending your honour. But in Tudor England, multitasking is key. Fan of the dramatic? Try a hat pin. Long and sharp enough to double as an emergency weapon, and very handy for keeping your hat from blowing away during outdoor intrigue. Then there are the accidental mishaps, like the noblewoman who caught her skirt on a stray dagger and nearly brought down an entire sideboard of pies, or the gentleman whose chainmail under tunic was so snug he could barely bend to sit, spending most of the banquet looking valiantly upright and slightly pained. Comfort is always secondary to preparedness. If you can survive a Tudor dinner party, you can survive anything. Why all this paranoia? The Tudors weren't just dramatic for sport. The political climate was about as stable as a three-legged stool. Court was a swirling nest of rivalries, shifting alliances, and the occasional mysterious disappearance. Wearing armour under your finest meant you understood the world you lived in. Plus, if you were lucky, you'd get to take your chainmail off at the end of the night. A small, private luxury, like removing very heavy, slightly dangerous pajamas. So next time you fuss over which jacket to wear to dinner, remember the Tudors, who never left home without wondering if their sleeve should be lined with silk, steel, or both. When in doubt, a little chainmail goes with everything. especially a healthy sense of suspicion. Red is for royalty, purple is for the truly rich, and brown is for, well, everyone else. Accidentally wearing the wrong color could get you a fine, a beating, or a life of shame. Pick wisely. In Tudor England, colors aren't just about personal style, they're about survival. Choosing your outfit is less. What brings out my eyes? And more. What will keep me out of prison? Forget fashion freedom. Here, the shade of your sleeve is a declaration of your entire place in the universe. Dress too brightly and you're an imposter. Dress too drabbily and you risk blending in with the livestock. Either way, someone's judging you, and it's probably a professional. Let's start at the top of the spectrum. Purple, the forbidden fruit of the Tudor colour wheel, is strictly reserved for the monarch, their family, and the rare noble with a royal IOU. The dye comes from crushed Mediterranean mollusks, making it so expensive that you could fund a small army with a single cloak. So if you see someone in purple, they're either genuinely royal or have an astonishing disregard for sumptuary laws and a very short life expectancy. Red is almost as risky. Bright scarlet, made with the rare cochineal bug or expensive madder root, is the colour of power. It's the Tudor version of a luxury car and a security detail rolled into one. Wear it without the proper title, and you're basically painting a target on your back. Even if you have the cash to buy red-dyed velvet, you'd better have a title or some very fast legs. Gold and silver are for the highest of the high, nobles, bishops, and the occasional royal favourite. If you dare to walk into church with a gold-embroidered doublet and you're not a duke, expect a fine, some heavy sighing from the priest, and a long talk with the local warden about your aspirations. For everyone else, these metallic hues are a distant dream, shimmering just out of reach. On the opposite end, we have brown, grey, and off-white, Tudor England's default palette. These colours are safe, sensible, and as universally flattering as a sack of potatoes. If you're a farmer, a craftsman, or just not interested in a confrontation with the authorities, brown is your friend. It's the colour of humility, practicality, and the English countryside after a particularly rainy week. Bonus: stains just blend right in. But maybe you want to take a small risk. Green, blue, and yellow each have their own mini hierarchies. Some shades of green are reserved for the gentry. Some blues are only for apprentices or certain guild members. Yellow? Wear it, but too much and people will think you're in mourning, or worse, trying to get attention. And if you're a woman, there's an entire sub-catalogue of rules. Maidens wear pale colours, respectable wives go for deep blues and dark reds, and widows are expected to embrace black forever, if possible. If you remarry too soon and show up in cheerful colours, prepare for a lifetime of side-eye and passive-aggressive church pew seating. The enforcement of colour is surprisingly intense. Town officials and sumptuary inspectors make regular rounds. Neighbourhood gossips are basically deputised. Imagine showing up to the market in a forbidden colour and realising everyone is staring, whispering, and, if you're unlucky, preparing to report you. Fines are common, and in extreme cases, the authorities confiscate your offending garment. Sorry, sir, you'll need to hand over your doublet. Yes, right now. No, you can't keep the buttons. Naturally, people find ways to bend the rules. Clever tailors line their clients' clothes with forbidden hues, hidden flashes of scarlet or purple, only revealed in a gust of wind or an accidental sleeve flip. Some folks dye cheap wool with onion skins or berries, hoping to pass for something grander when the sun hits just right. It's the original fashion hustle. So the next time you're agonizing over navy or black socks, remember the stakes used to be much, much higher. In Tudor England, colours had consequences, and your wardrobe wasn't just about self-expression, it was a public resume. Choose wrong, and you weren't just out of fashion. You were out of society, and possibly out of luck. Your clothing is a resume. Turn up in last year's slashed sleeves, and nobody will take your ambitions seriously. Forget LinkedIn. Just look at someone's socks. In Tudor England, your first impression doesn't come from a firm handshake or a business card. It comes from your doublet, your ruff, and, if you really want to move up the social ladder, the number of ribbons exploding off your shoes. Each morning isn't just about getting dressed. It's about strategizing for survival in the high-stakes fashion economy. Because here, your outfit is both your passport and your cover letter, and a single wardrobe misstep could turn you from rising star to cautionary tale before you even make it to breakfast. Let's say you're hoping for a job at court. Maybe you want to impress a powerful lord or catch the eye of the queen herself. You'll need to dress the part, tastefully, expensively, and always in the latest style. Show up wearing last year's fashions. And you might as well be waving a banner that says "not ready for promotion." The rules change constantly. Sleeves are slashed and puffed this season, while last season they were plain and tight. Ruff sizes fluctuate with royal moods, and the right hat could mean the difference between up-and-comer and likely to spill wine on the tapestries. And woe betide you if you try to dress above your station. Sumptuary laws aside, your peers and rivals will notice. Too much velvet on an apprentice? Clearly a social climber. Embroidered hose on a minor official? A sign of ambition, and not the good kind. Wearing the right amount of lace for your income is its own art, and one that could keep you safely climbing, or leave you stranded outside the great hall doors with a rapidly cooling bowl of pottage. Of course, you could always underdress. That's a different kind of mistake. Show up looking drab and underwhelming, and nobody will trust you with anything valuable, certainly not their secrets or their family's hand in marriage. In Tudor England, nobody wants to align themselves with someone who can't even keep up with sleeve trends. You might be honest and hard-working, but if your cuffs aren't fashionable, the only thing you'll be managing is livestock. Even the smallest accessories are loaded with meaning. Shoes, gloves, ribbons, each one sends a message. A well-placed feather might suggest you're witty and up-to-date. A droopy, outdated hat says, "I peaked in 1542. Socks aren't just for comfort either. They're glimpsed in passing, flashes of colour that announce your prosperity, or lack thereof, to every sharp-eyed observer in the room. For women, the situation is even more perilous. Every part of your outfit is scrutinized for status, taste, and, of course, marriage potential. The wrong fabric, a droopy ruff, or a bodice from last season's cut, could see your invitation to dinner quietly rescinded. A clever, upwardly mobile lady will invest in at least one item of spectacular fashion: a sparkling brooch, a cunning new cap, or a stunningly modern farthingale. It's the Tudor version of putting proficient in Excel on your resume. No one will ask, but everyone expects it. And when the Queen sets a new trend, the scramble to comply is immediate and all-consuming. If Elizabeth declares that yellow is in, you'd better have a yellow ribbon by sundown. Failure to keep up means you're not paying attention. Worse, it means you might not be loyal enough. Naturally, there's room for creative cheating, secretly restitching an old doublet to match this year's cut, sewing new trim over faded sleeves, or borrowing a friend's fashionable cloak for a big event. But be careful, the Tudors love a good exposé. Nothing says career-limiting move like being caught in a counterfeit codpiece. So, next time you agonize over your work outfit, or silently judge someone's shoes in a meeting, remember, in Tudor England, your clothing really could make or break your future. Dress shabbily, and they remember the clothes. Dress impeccably, and they remember the person. Just hope they remember your name, too. Tudor children aren't spared. They're trussed up like little adults, complete with ruffs and laces and shoes they'll outgrow by dinner. If you think dressing a modern toddler is hard, try wrapping 1 in 3 layers of linen, adding a tiny doublet, and finishing the look with a ruff the size of a small satellite dish. In Tudor England, children's clothing is less about comfort and more about announcing the family's social status to anyone within eyeshot. Gone are the days of adorable onesies and soft elastic waistbands. Here, Every child is a miniature version of their parents, a pint-sized ambassador for the family fortune, or lack thereof. The first fashion hurdle for any Tudor baby is swaddling. Forget swaddle blankets with cutesy prints. Newborns are wrapped tightly from neck to toe in long bands of cloth, transforming them into little fabric burritos with absolutely no chance of moving their arms or legs. The idea is to keep the baby's limbs straight and, if the nurse is feeling generous, to keep them warm. More often, the baby just looks surprised and slightly cross, and stays that way for the first 3 months of life. Once freed from their fabric cocoons, Tudor toddlers graduate straight into scaled-down versions of adult outfits. For boys, it's tiny doublets, hose, and sometimes even a small codpiece, because nothing says precocious like unnecessary padding at age 3. Girls get laced bodices, petticoats, and enough ribbons to immobilize even the most energetic future duchess. And let's not forget the miniature ruff, which guarantees that no child can ever spill soup down their front without significant collateral damage. Children's shoes are their own ordeal. Made from the same stiff leather as adult footwear, these tiny torture devices are designed to be outgrown approximately every 6 weeks. The average Tudor parent spends a fortune on cobblers, or, if times are tough, simply stuffs a little extra straw in the toes and hopes nobody notices. Socks? If you're lucky, they'll be hand-knit and woolly. If not, your child's feet are just one more casualty in the ongoing battle against blisters and cold floors. Fashion in Tudor childhood isn't just about looks, it's about survival. Cold houses, hard floors, and even harder social expectations mean every layer has to pull its weight. Padded jackets double as armor against both the elements and the occasional sibling brawl. Caps, hoods, and hats are mandatory for keeping in what little body heat escapes from beneath those linen wraps. For the truly stylish, decorative pins hold everything together, at least until someone gets poked. Safety standards? Those haven't been invented yet. Ribbons, laces, and pins dangle dangerously close to little mouths and fingers. More than one Tudor family dinner has ended with a frantic search for a missing brooch or an improvised game of untangle the child from their own bodice. And then there are the special occasions when all bets are off and fashion is turned up to 11. Picture a 5-year-old at a family wedding, festooned in pearls, brocade, and possibly a small sword if he's a boy of noble birth. Any hopes for running around the garden are dashed by a farthingale or 3, and the only thing being learned at the feast is the delicate art of staying upright while top-heavy. Naturally, all this dressing up serves a purpose. In a society obsessed with order and status, children are expected to look the part from birth. A well-dressed child reflects a well-managed household and reassures everyone that the next generation knows how to tie a lace and starch a ruff. If the cost is a little discomfort and the occasional minor accident, well, that's just the price of being born in the 16th century. So next time you wrestle a child into a winter coat or cut a scratchy tag out of a t-shirt, remember, at least you didn't have to negotiate with an angry toddler about the placement of their codpiece. In Tudor England, childhood fashion wasn't about play, it was about preparing for a lifetime of very itchy, very public expectations. Starch is life. Starch is status. But what happens when your ruff flops? Social collapse, that's what. In Tudor England, ruffs aren't just neckwear. They're a public monument to your personal hygiene, wealth, and dedication to fabric-based hardship. And keeping a ruff upright is a full-time job, only possible with copious amounts of starch. This isn't the cornstarch you scatter on your kitchen counter while making cookies. Tudor starch is a labor-intensive potion made from wheat or bran, mixed, boiled, and filtered to just the right consistency to turn floppy linen into something that could plausibly serve as a small fortification. But what happens when the starch runs out? That's not just a fashion emergency, it's a catastrophe. Imagine a dinner party where, instead of crisp, halo-like ruffs, you're greeted by a sea of limp, sagging linen. Suddenly, nobody wants to make eye contact. Nobles clutch their necks in horror, and whispers of, "Did you see Lady Godfrey's ruff?" Absolutely tragic echo around the hall. It's as if someone's shown up to a black tie event in pajamas, except the pajamas have given up on life and gravity at the same time. Starch isn't just about keeping up appearances, it's about maintaining order. The process is so elaborate that entire professions spring up around it. Starchers, often women, make a living boiling, straining, and carefully painting linen with a brush, then shaping the ruff into elaborate, gravity-defying pleats. It's chemistry, architecture, and artistry rolled into one. And the best starchers are as highly prized as the local physician, and far more trusted. Running out of starch means disaster for the ambitious courtier. Imagine nervously smoothing your ruff before a royal audience, only for it to collapse halfway through your bow. A droopy ruff signals weakness, poverty, or, worst of all, a lack of commitment to social standards. You may as well announce that you've given up on both society and personal hygiene. Rival courtiers will snicker behind fans, and you'll find yourself mysteriously uninvited from all future banquets. Naturally, people get creative when supplies run low. Some desperate souls turn to flour or even powdered chalk, which works in a pinch but leaves you shedding little clouds of dust whenever you move. Others try soap, but soap is rare and mostly used for things like washing, which is a hard sell in Tudor England anyway. There are tales of folks using animal glue, resulting in ruffs that are impressively upright and faintly scented of barnyard. It's a high price to pay for dignity, but some are willing to risk smelling like a cheese market if it means keeping up appearances. Starch shortages aren't always random either. Bad harvests, war, or trade disputes can leave the whole country stiff-necked and panicking. The wealthy hoard their private stashes, the less fortunate resort to ironing their ruffs flat and pretending it's a bold new trend. It never is. Occasionally, a rogue courtier tries to style a limp ruff into an avant-garde shape, but the only thing they achieve is scandal and maybe an early retirement to the countryside, far away from the critical eyes of London. When the crisis ends and the starch supply returns, so does social order. Ruffs spring back to life, banquets resume, and everyone pretends the whole incident never happened. Starch merchants are greeted as heroes, and the fashion world breathes a collective sigh of relief, their collars once again standing tall against the forces of nature and common sense. So next time you iron a shirt or grumble about a wrinkled collar, remember the Tudors. For them, one bad batch of starch could mean a week of whispered ridicule and a lifetime of being remembered as that one with the flaccid ruff. In a world where status was measured in inches of linen, you were only ever one shortage away from social disaster. There's no Gore-Tex, no umbrellas, just layers and hope. Everyone is always a little bit damp, and the mould is starting to unionize. Welcome to Tudor England, where the climate can be best described as indecisively moist, and every season brings its own flavor of sogginess. Rain isn't just a possibility, it's a certainty. If it's not pouring, it's drizzling. If it's not drizzling, it's misting in that sly, sideways way that finds every gap in your clothing and settles into your bones. It's not a question of if you'll get wet, just how much, and for how long. Without waterproof fabrics or even the basic courtesy of a raincoat, Tudor folks rely on layers, lots and lots of layers. Start with a linen shift to soak up the sweat and hope. Add a thick woolen tunic. Wool, at least, keeps you a little bit warm when wet, even as it quadruples in weight and sticks to your legs like a damp sheet. Throw on a heavy cloak, ideally with a deep hood, and you've basically wrapped yourself in the medieval equivalent of a wet blanket. This is not a style choice, it's survival. For those with money, or ambition, or both, cloaks are lined with fur. This sounds luxurious until you realize the fur is as likely to harbor fleas as to keep you dry. Eventually, the outer layer of your cloak will be so saturated that it could probably be wrung out into a bucket. The real skill lies in learning how to ignore the persistent cold trickling down your back and maintaining an air of dignity while your socks slowly become small, portable ponds. Shoes are, predictably, useless. Leather soaks up water like a sponge and never dries completely, So Tudor England's entire population develops feet that are perpetually pruny. Some wear wooden pattens, platforms strapped under shoes to lift you out of the worst of the mud. Of course, this means walking is now an extreme sport, where a wrong step can send you skidding down the street and into the nearest goose. The houses aren't much better. Thatch roofs leak, stone walls seep. Windows, if you're lucky enough to have them, are a thin barrier against the relentless humidity. By November, your home has sprouted a fine crop of mould in every corner, and the air is thick with the scent of damp wool, smoke, and defeat. If you want to dry anything, you hang it near the hearth and hope for the best. Sometimes, all you manage to do is roast one side while the other side stays stubbornly soggy. Clothes rarely get a proper drying out. Rainy weather means laundry takes days, and by the time your shirt is finally dry, it's time to wash it again. The result is an endless, damp cycle of hope and resignation. It's said that a truly dry linen shift is the stuff of legends, something you only glimpse in the sunlight for a brief, glorious hour, right before a passing shower brings it all crashing back to reality. Travel is an adventure. Roads turn into muddy rivers. Horses develop a strong sense of humor and an even stronger desire not to move. If you're traveling on foot, you learn to accept a certain level of mud on every garment. There are stories of people leaving for market in clean clothes and returning in outfits that are 50% heavier and 3 shades darker. And yet, the English endure. Perhaps it's all those layers, or perhaps it's sheer stubbornness. The weather might be miserable, but at least everyone is equally damp. Complaining about it is a national pastime, second only to inventing new ways to keep the rain out and optimism in. So, next time you grumble about a wet sock or a misty commute, remember the Tudors. They faced every day with nothing but a damp wool cloak and the faint, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would be dry. It never was, but at least they had each other and a good story to tell by the fire. Washing your clothes means hauling buckets, boiling water, and beating the life out of fabric. The good news, the dirt is probably holding your outfit together. Let's set the scene. It's a chilly morning in Tudor England, and you're already behind schedule. Laundry day has arrived, and there's no escaping it. The air is thick with the promise of backache, blistered hands, and that faint universal scent of something's burning. There are no washing machines, no handy spin cycles, and certainly no delicate settings. Here, laundry is an act of brute force, optimism, and the faint hope that you won't accidentally destroy your only decent shirt in the process. The first step is water. Lots and lots of water. If you're lucky enough to live near a stream, congratulations. You'll be spending the next several hours hauling bucket after bucket back to your house. If not, it's off to the well, with a rope, a pail, and a growing sense of despair. Every splash is a reminder that cleanliness comes at a steep price, and dry socks are a luxury reserved for the patient and persistent. Next comes the fire. You'll need to heat all that water, usually in a massive iron cauldron set over the hearth. This is a job for the strong of arm and the brave of heart, as every medieval household contains at least one cautionary tale about someone who tripped, slipped, or fainted from the combined assault of heat and soap fumes. Once the water is at a rolling boil, it's time for the soap, if you have it. Most Tudors make do with lye, ashes, or a particularly abrasive clump of leftover animal fat. The goal isn't to create bubbles, but to strip away the worst of the grime, or at least make the fabric smell less like last month's dinner. Now, the scrubbing. Forget gentle agitation. The Tudor approach to laundry is basically take your anger out on your clothes. You slap, beat, and stomp the garments against rocks, wooden boards, or anything else that won't collapse under pressure. It's a communal event, too. Neighbours gather at the riverbank, or the big washing day in the courtyard, gossiping between swings of the paddle and furtive glances at each other's linen. Every stain tells a story, and everyone is silently judging who's the cleanest or who's simply best at hiding their stains. Rinsing comes next, requiring another marathon of bucket hauling. The water is rarely clean by this point. But as long as it's less brown than what came out of the cauldron, you call it a win. Then comes the wringing, an exercise in teamwork, brute strength, and the occasional dislocated thumb. You twist, squeeze, and hope the seams hold. Drying the laundry is a slow-motion race against the weather. Clothes are hung on hedges, draped over bushes, or stretched between trees, wherever the sun or the faintest breeze might reach them. With any luck, a neighbour's dog won't make off with your best shirt, and the local birds will show mercy on your only clean petticoat. Sometimes it rains halfway through, and you get to repeat the process, only this time with extra mud. Ironing, for those with the means, involves heated metal sad irons, named, presumably for the mood they induce, pressed over the damp linen, infusing the room with the delightful scent of scorched hope. If you're in the upper crust, your shirts might even be starched, a badge of honour, but also another chore entirely, since starched collars are to comfort what hedgehogs are to hugs. At the end of the day, you gather your clean or cleanish clothes, grateful for every unbroken thread. Your arms ache, your back throbs, and you wonder if the dirt really was so bad after all. Still, there's nothing quite like the feeling of slipping into a freshly laundered shift, even if you know you'll be doing it all over again next week. So next time you grumble about doing laundry, remember the Tudors, masters of mud, endurance, and the lost art of being only slightly less filthy than yesterday. Whether it's fox, mink, or swan, the wealthier you are, the more animal bits you're allowed to wear. Ethics? Not invented yet. In Tudor England, your wardrobe is less about personal expression and more about building your own travelling menagerie on your body. If it once had a heartbeat, chances are someone has turned it into a hat, a muff, or a very expensive trim. The message is clear. Why choose between warmth and status when you can wrap yourself in both? And take the local wildlife with you everywhere you go. Let's start with fur. For the upper crust, fur is the ultimate symbol of wealth, taste, and the ability to ignore subtle smells. Royalty and the highest nobility go for ermine, a white fur with black-tipped tails, because nothing says in charge like wearing enough small rodents to populate a minor woodland. Lesser nobles and gentry settle for mink, fox, or squirrel, with the latter being so common that you could mistake a crowded court for a squirrel appreciation society. Don't forget lambswool, wolf, or the occasional imported beaver, for those truly desperate to flaunt their trading connections. The coats and cloaks get heavier, fluffier, and pricier with each social rung. You'll see fur-lined sleeves, collars so thick they double as neck pillows, and capes grand enough to be used as emergency tents. Children of the wealthy are trussed up in furs from an early age, so even the family dog knows who gets first pick at the fireside. For those with less disposable income, the options are a little more rustic. Rabbit fur is the staple of the working classes, soft, serviceable, and just as prone to attracting fleas as the more expensive varieties. If you can't afford that, you can always borrow the pelts from whatever's been caught in your traps. Nothing says fashion forward quite like a homemade hat that's still making suspicious rustling noises. But the real party trick of Tudor fashion is feathers. Ostrich plumes are worth their weight in gold, imported from far-off lands and attached to hats, fans, and sometimes even shoes. The wealthiest nobles might wear entire birds, or at least enough plumage to startle the local bird-watching society. Peacock feathers, swan down, and even goose quills make appearances at banquets, tournaments, and especially in portraits. If you ever wonder why so many Tudors look slightly alarmed in their paintings, remember they might be worried about sneezing out a feather in front of the Queen. And the best part? There are no rules, except that the richer you are, the more elaborate your animal accessories should be. Mix and match, layer up, and if you can, add a jeweled brooch for emphasis. The only limit is your budget and how much weight your neck can support. Why settle for one fur when you can wear 3? Why pin a single feather when you can create a hat so top-heavy it requires actual architectural planning? Of course, all this comes with side effects. Feathers wilt in the rain, Furs attract every flea and louse for miles. If you get too close to a fire, your entire outfit is at risk of going up in an expensive, feathery blaze. There's always a chance that last winter's cloak will come out of storage smelling slightly of the barnyard and requiring 3 sachets of lavender and a healthy sense of denial. Still, no one is giving up their animal accessories. To go fur-free in court is to invite pity, suspicion, or both. Feathers and furs are not just decoration. They are your ticket to warmth, admiration, and, occasionally, the envy of your rivals. And if you happen to look like a particularly ambitious scarecrow while doing it, all the better. You've made it in Tudor England. So next time you worry about faux fur or ponder a feathered accessory, remember the Tudors, who never met a creature they couldn't turn into a conversation piece and a status symbol. Ethics may not have been invented, but the art of the fashion flex was alive and well. No self-respecting Tudor would leave the house without accessories. The more impractical, the better. A sword says, "I'm fashionable, but also ready for anything." If you ever feared the modern accessorize or die mentality was new, rest assured, Tudors were here first, and they took it to the next level. Accessorizing in Tudor England wasn't just about adding a little flair. It was about proclaiming your social status, your wealth, your connections, and most importantly, your readiness to defend your outfit at a moment's notice. Let's start with the fan. The fan is not just for fluttering delicately during a bout of fainting at a particularly shocking gossip reveal. It is the Tudor answer to air conditioning, personal privacy screen, and social semaphore all in one. Made from feathers, silk, lace, or any material expensive enough to make your neighbors jealous, the fan could be snapped open to display painted scenes of faraway lands, classical myths, or, if you're feeling cheeky, your family crest. Wielded well, a fan is a tool for subtle communication. One flick signals interest, another conveys boredom, and a rapid flutter means someone's shoes are on fire, but we don't discuss it in public. Gloves, meanwhile, are the Tudor equivalent of the latest must-have tech. They are worn by both men and women, regardless of whether you have anything to hide on your hands. Gloves could be plain leather, or ostentatiously embroidered, trimmed in fur, or even perfumed, so you can shake hands without exposing anyone to the more aromatic realities of Tudor hygiene. The richer you are, the less practical your gloves become. Some are so elaborately decorated with gold and gems that you'd rather chew your own arm off than risk getting them dirty. Tossing a glove at someone's feet is also the formal way to challenge them to a duel, though most modern office squabbles are resolved with passive-aggressive emails instead. Now, let's talk about the sword. For the well-dressed man about town, a sword is as crucial as a belt or a pair of shoes. Swords serve multiple functions. They're fashion statements, practical tools for self-defense, and, for some, glorified toothpicks when the roast boar gets a little chewy. Swords are carried everywhere, banquets, markets, even church. The longer the sword, the bolder the statement. Although, in crowded rooms, you risk tripping over your own ambition and possibly a few servants. Scabbards are often as flashy as the swords themselves, decorated with jewels, embroidery, or precious metals. So even if you never draw your blade, everyone knows you could, if you weren't afraid of wrinkling your doublet. But why stop there? Purses, pomanders, decorative belts, and handkerchiefs are all fair game. For ladies, a beaded reticule or lace-edged purse might dangle from the waist, ready to hold a coin or a secret note. Pomanders, scented balls of herbs and spices, are both accessories and public service announcements, shielding the wearer from unpleasant smells and, in theory, the plague. If you can find a way to hang it, pin it, or stuff it into your ensemble, it's coming with you. And let's not forget jewelry, rings, chains, brooches and pins, all layered with wild abandon. The more impractical, the better. If your sleeve droops under the weight of your accessories, you're doing it right. Fans and gloves, hats and sashes, all add up to a dizzying display of wealth and creative inconvenience. It's said that a well-accessorized Tudor could jingle and clank their way through a banquet, never once needing to actually say, "I am important, their outfit did all the work." So next time you agonize over the right pair of sunglasses or the color of your phone case, remember the Tudors, people who accessorized as if the fate of their souls depended on it. In their world, every bauble had a meaning, every fan a message, and every sword a story. And if it all got in the way, well, at least you look good, right up until you tripped over your own ambition. Death is common, but that's no excuse for looking drab. Mourning outfits involve so much black velvet you could get lost in a corridor and never return. In Tudor England, grief isn't a private affair. It's a fashion statement with its own strict rulebook. The art of mourning is all about showing respect for the dearly departed, while also reminding everyone you haven't lost your sense of style, just your loved one. Think less sackcloth and ashes, more gothic glamour with the threat of heatstroke. Black is the colour of choice, but not just any black. The finest, deepest, most soul-absorbing shade is required. And it comes at a price. Dyes are expensive and tricky to produce, so achieving the right level of funereal gloom is a luxury only the wealthy can afford. If your mourning outfit is more charcoal grey than infinite void, you run the risk of being quietly judged by your neighbours, who will absolutely keep tabs on whether your shade of black is up to snuff. Velvet is everywhere. Heavy, hot, and dazzlingly impractical, it lines every gown, cloak, and hat. In the warmer months, this is less mourning and more slow-cooked, but suffering for fashion is, after all, part of the Tudor way. Lace, jet beads, and elaborate black embroidery add detail and dimension, because nothing says "I miss you" like several kilos of extra fabric stitched into funereal swirls. Hats are mandatory, of course. Women don hoods, veils, and hats so large and so dark they might double as portable tents. Some mourning hoods are so dramatic they block out the sun, creating a sort of built-in shade for all that velvet. For men, a wide-brimmed black cap or feathered hat does the trick, usually topped off with a somber black band to signal just how seriously you're taking your grief and your commitment to style. Even accessories must get in on the action. Gloves are dyed black, rings are set with jet or onyx, and brooches feature images of skulls, coffins, or sorrowful angels. If you have money, you might commission a mourning ring with a lock of the deceased's hair sealed inside, a sentimental keepsake and a daily reminder that Tudor medicine isn't all it's cracked up to be. Black ribbons are tied onto sleeves, sashes, and anything else not already drenched in velvet. Children, too, are not spared the spectacle. Tiny mourning outfits are sewn up almost overnight, miniature gowns, doublets, and even ruffs, all in regulation black. Toddlers teeter around in funereal finery, unclear on why everyone is so quiet but excited to be wearing the softest outfit they've ever owned. Mourning is also strictly scheduled. There are set periods for deep mourning, when you must dress exclusively in black, avoid jewellery that sparkles, and generally avoid looking even mildly cheerful. Eventually, if you're lucky, you'll graduate to half mourning, which allows for some white, grey, or purple, like a cautious reintroduction to colour, one trim at a time. Jump the gun on colour too early, though, and the local busybody will note it in her prayer book. Your social standing, already fragile, will collapse faster than a starched ruff in a thunderstorm. It isn't all just for show. Mourning attire broadcasts your status and your emotional depth. The longer you mourn and the grander your wardrobe, the more respect, and occasionally sympathy casseroles, you receive. Show up at a funeral in anything less than head-to-toe black velvet, and people will talk, quietly, respectfully, and forever. So, the next time you slip on a little black dress, remember the Tudors, who transformed grief into a high-stakes sartorial competition. Mourning might be miserable, but at least you could look stunning while being sad. In Tudor England, style, like death, waits for no one. Roads are terrible, so you dress for mud, puddles, and the chance that a horse might sneeze on you. Trains don't exist, so plan your outfit for a week-long trudge. In Tudor England, travel is less about convenience and more about survival. Getting from point A to point B is a heroic undertaking that begins not with booking a ticket, but with selecting the least destructible pieces in your wardrobe. The aim is to arrive at your destination with at least half your clothes intact, a feat that requires strategy, stamina, and a profound tolerance for dirt. Let's start with the roads, which, to be generous, are suggestions rather than surfaces. In winter, they are oceans of mud. In summer, they are rutted, dust-choked obstacle courses. Bridges are rare, fords are risky, and every village boasts at least one local who has been lost to a puddle with no visible bottom. So, when planning your outfit, durability comes before dignity. Cloaks are your best friend, and, if the weather's bad enough, your only friend. They're made of thick, heavy wool, often doubled and sometimes lined with fur if you're wealthy or ambitious. These cloaks serve as umbrellas, blankets, and sometimes even makeshift tents. They are designed to take a beating. Expect them to pick up an entire ecosystem of twigs, leaves, and the occasional mouse. If you manage to keep your cloak for more than a year without needing emergency patchwork, you're either not traveling enough, or you've sold your soul to the local dyer for some extra durable thread. Footwear is strictly utilitarian. Out go the delicate, embroidered slippers of court. In come stout leather boots, laced up to your knees and probably stuffed with hay for warmth. And, let's be honest, for plugging holes. Mud will climb them with the persistence of a Tudor tax collector, and after a few days on the road, your feet will develop calluses that could frighten a stonemason. Some travellers try wooden pattens, platforms strapped to the soles to lift you above the worst muck. The result? You become part human, part stilt walker, and the sound of your journey can be heard 2 towns over. Layering is key. Under your cloak and boots, you wear as many layers as possible: shirts, doublets, hose, and if you're a lady, a woolen kirtle over your petticoats. Rain, wind, or surprise hail? No problem, just add another layer. Of course, this means you'll be roasting by noon and frozen by dusk, but that's just the Tudor way. If you're lucky, you'll have a broad-brimmed hat to keep the rain and the sun, and occasionally the gifts of passing birds, off your face. Luggage is less about trunks and more about ingenuity. There are no rolling suitcases, just bags, pouches, and what you can tie to your belt or saddle. The truly prepared wrap their cleanest shift or shirt in a bundle of waxed cloth and pray it survives the journey. Travel stains aren't just expected, they're the badge of anyone who's left their parish in the last decade. Don't forget the accessories: gloves for warmth and for holding the reins, a scarf to tie around your nose when passing particularly fragrant towns, and a dagger tucked into your boot, just in case bad weather takes a more human form. And, of course, your attitude is as much a part of your attire as anything you wear. A sense of humour, a robust immune system, and a healthy respect for livestock are the best companions a Tudor traveller can have. By the time you arrive, you'll be muddy, windblown, and slightly unrecognisable, but still fashionably present. So the next time your train is late or your flight is cancelled, remember the Tudors. Travel for them was a full-contact sport, one that demanded resilience, a love of layers, and a wardrobe that could withstand not just the elements, but everything the English countryside could throw, or sneeze, at it. And somehow, they still managed to look good for dinner. A Tudor dinner party is a minefield of etiquette, elbows, and gravy stains. Wearing white? Bold choice. In Tudor England, dinner is not just a meal, it's a stage, a tournament, and an unspoken competition for survival in silk and starch. The invitation arrives, and with it, the single most important question: what are you going to wear, and will it still be wearable by the time dessert arrives? The answer determines not just your comfort, but your social standing, your reputation, and, if you're unlucky with the soup, your prospects for future invitations. Let's start with the basics. If you're attending a formal dinner, expect to be dressed in your finest. For men, this means doublets made of velvet or silk, elaborate sleeves slashed to show off a contrasting underlayer, and hose so tight they test your relationship with your tailor, and your own hamstrings. For women, it's an avalanche of petticoats, stiffened bodices, decorative aprons, and enough embroidery to cover a small county. The finishing touch for everyone? A ruff, starched to the tensile strength of a bear trap, guaranteed to catch any stray crumbs before they make it to your shirt. But don't think of the ruff as just a napkin replacement. Wearing a perfectly starched ruff is a sign that you know what you're doing in high society. A limp, unstarched ruff says, "I lost my starch and my social standing." A ruff with a gravy stain? Don't even think about it. You might as well tattoo peasant across your forehead. Now, let's talk about colour. White is the ultimate power move, a declaration of confidence in your table manners and your ability to dodge the tidal waves of Tudor gravy. It's also a not-so-subtle flex, since only the wealthy can afford to keep linen sparkling white. Most people play it safe with dark colours, patterned fabrics, or strategically placed jewellery to draw the eye away from suspicious splotches. Dinner attire comes with built-in hazards. The sleeves are wide, the collar's high, and the table crowded with candle flames, communal trenchers, and enough sharp knives to arm a small rebellion. Eating is an art. One false move and your sleeve is swimming in sauce. Your ruff has claimed a chicken bone, and you've started a small fire on your neighbour's lace cuff. The Tudors don't use forks yet, unless you're at the cutting edge of fashion, so your hands, and by extension, your clothes, are dangerously close to disaster at every bite. And the accessories. Gloves, rings, and jeweled brooches must be managed with surgical precision. You remove your gloves for eating, otherwise you're signalling that you don't trust the cook. But you must keep track of them, or risk them slipping to the floor and disappearing forever under the rushes. A dropped ring is a potential scandal. Was it an accident, or a signal to that brooding courtier 3 seats away? If you're really aiming to impress, you might sport a scented pomander, dangling from your belt, to fend off the less appetizing aromas of communal dining. Just be careful not to dip it in the stew. Every social rank has its own rules and pitfalls. Nobles must stay pristine. Merchants need to show off their prosperity without looking flashy. And the upwardly mobile must balance trendiness with humility, lest they attract the wrong kind of attention from sumptuary law enforcers or from jealous rivals. One gravy accident could spell months of gossip. The dinner party doesn't end when the plates are cleared. On your way out, you'll be judged not only on your wit and manners, but on the state of your attire. Did you make it through without a stain? Did your ruff stay upright and unsullied? Did your shoes survive an evening on rush-strewn floors? Congratulations, you'll be invited back. So next time you stress about spaghetti on your shirt, spare a thought for the Tudors, whose dinner parties were Olympic events in stain avoidance. In their world, to dine in style was to dance with danger, armed only with a ruff, a prayer, and an optimistic laundry maid waiting at home. At the end of the day, it takes 2 servants, a lot of patience, and a prayer to St. Crispin to get you out of your outfit. Try not to faint from lack of oxygen. Unwinding from a day in Tudor England isn't just about kicking off your shoes and flopping into bed. It's a carefully choreographed performance, requiring teamwork, muscle, and nerves of steel. After hours trussed up in layers of linen, wool, whalebone, ruffs, ribbons, codpieces, laces, hooks, and pins, the only thing standing between you and sweet relief is the world's slowest striptease. If you're wealthy or moderately important, you have help. Your servants have spent years mastering the delicate art of undressing their master or mistress without drawing blood, unraveling a sleeve, or accidentally exposing the family secrets to the rest of the household. First, the jewellery comes off, rings pried from swollen fingers, chains unfastened from under-tangled hair, brooches removed with the precision of a jeweller diffusing a particularly sparkly bomb. Next come the accessories: gloves, pomanders, fans, and any oddments you've managed to accumulate through the day. Each one must be carefully unpinned, untied, and placed in the correct chest or pouch. Lose a glove, and you'll be hunting for it all week. Drop a jeweled hat pin, and you risk stepping on it in the middle of the night. an experience rumoured to inspire entire genres of religious poetry. Now for the main event, the clothing. Every layer must be untied, unlaced, unbuttoned, or just plain wrestled off. The bodice is eased open, sometimes pried apart if the day's feasting got out of hand. The doublet's hooks and laces are tackled next, with a running tally of new knots discovered since breakfast. Petticoats and underskirts come off, one after another, until you're left in your linen shift, wondering how you managed to put all this on in the first place. And then there's the ruff, the mighty, starched architectural marvel perched around your neck like a frilled lizard. Removing it without snapping the pleats or accidentally powdering the entire room with stray starch requires the focus of a surgeon and the touch of a saint. Some say it's best to hold your breath and think calming thoughts, in case the ruff has become so tight it's cut off circulation to most of your higher reasoning skills. Men aren't spared. Hose must be untied from doublets, shoes pried off, and the codpiece, well, the less said about the process of detaching this infamous accessory, the better. It's a delicate operation, requiring steady hands and the willingness to confront the existential questions of Tudor masculinity head-on. Once you're down to your underclothes, you're not done yet. If it's laundry day, the outer layers are handed off for cleaning, an ordeal you now understand all too well. Otherwise, garments are carefully aired out, brushed, and hung to avoid the attention of moths, mice, and other opportunistic residents of the average Tudor wardrobe. For those without help, undressing is a solo adventure. You wrestle with knots, contort your arms behind your back, and possibly invent whole new curses. Many a Tudor peasant has ended the day trapped in a partially laced bodice, or with one shoe stubbornly refusing to budge, falling asleep right where they are and hoping tomorrow's neighbour will lend a hand. By the time you're finally free, the act of crawling into bed feels like a small miracle. You can breathe, your ribs are grateful, and your skin, finally exposed to the air, tingles with the joy of survival. You fall asleep, swaddled in your shift, quietly vowing never to get so dressed up again, at least until breakfast, when the cycle begins anew. So next time you peel off your socks or struggle with a zipper, remember the Tudors. For them, undressing was an epic saga, a nightly trust fall with their servants, their dexterity, and the enduring hope that tomorrow's outfit would be just a little easier to escape. Ever wonder why portraits of Tudor nobles all look like they've been gently basted in moonlight? Welcome to the dangerous world of Tudor cosmetics, where looking pale and ghostly was the ultimate flex. Achieving the perfect, recently exhumed complexion required an arsenal of lead-based powders, questionable rouges, and the constant risk of poisoning yourself before dessert. No beauty blender required, just a strong constitution and a total disregard for your internal organs. Let's set the mood. The ultimate status symbol in Tudor England is not flawless skin, but skin that practically glows in the dark, a living, breathing proof that you never ever have to toil in the fields. Tan lines, social suicide, any hint of sun-kissed health, and you might be mistaken for someone who works for a living, a fate worse than a dropped ruff in the presence of royalty. So, what's a noble to do? Simple. Out come the cosmetics, if you can call them that. The most popular look is a face powdered almost white, thanks to a delightful mixture known as Venetian ceruse, white lead mixed with vinegar and water, smeared lavishly across the cheeks, forehead, and chin. The result? A radiant, porcelain-like glow, which unfortunately also comes with the side effect of turning your skin into a fragile, slowly deteriorating mask. But what's a little lead poisoning in pursuit of perfection? Each day begins with a layer of ceruse, applied as thickly as your social aspirations allow. The finish is striking, smooth, chalky, and utterly unnatural, perfect for showing up in portraits or, for the very ambitious, scaring the local children. After a few weeks of this, your skin might start to flake, but that's just a sign you're truly committed to the look. Extra points if you also develop mysterious stomach pains, headaches, and a lingering sense of doom, the signature symptoms of Tudor high fashion. Of course, A pale canvas needs accenting. Enter the rouge, a blend of mercury, cinnabar, or good old-fashioned beetroot, dabbed artfully on the cheeks and lips. Tudor beauty standards demanded just enough colour to prove you weren't already dead, but not so much that you looked like you'd been outdoors. If your cheeks were too rosy, people might suspect you'd been walking briskly, or worse, feeling emotions. The goal is that delicate balance between ethereal elegance and this might be my last banquet. Brows and hairlines are also fair game. Queen Elizabeth I famously plucked her brows and even her hairline into a soaring arch, giving her the look of perpetual surprise and regal indifference. Thin, high brows signaled sophistication. If your natural hair resisted, never fear. A little belladonna could help thin things out, or you could just draw the whole brow back in with charcoal. Bonus points if it looks as though it's floating somewhere near your hat. And then there's the finishing touch, a sprinkling of scented powder to mask the faint aroma of vinegar, metal, and ambition. Perfumed handkerchiefs are a must for those wishing to faint gracefully, as well as to shield the nose from less fortunate members of the banquet hall who haven't discovered the joys of daily poisoning. There's a certain irony to it all. The more dangerous the ingredients, the more desirable the look. By the late 16th century, tales of skin lesions, tooth loss, and sudden deaths do little to deter the devoted. After all, if the Queen herself survives on a steady diet of beauty products that would horrify a modern dermatologist, who are you to argue? So next time you worry about your concealer or frown at a breakout, remember the Tudors who risked life and liver for the right to glow, literally. In a world without filters, the only way to achieve perfection was to apply, reapply, and accept that looking beautiful just might kill you, all in the name of a flawless, death-defying finish. Congratulations, you're dressed. Now, try moving. Tudor outfits are held together with an alarming number of pins, ties, and laces. Every step is a gamble. Will your sleeve stay on, or will you accidentally reenact the Battle of Bosworth in the hallway? There's nothing like getting stabbed by your own fashion choices, and no shortage of opportunities to snag yourself on anything with a sharp corner or a passing housecat. The first thing you learn about Tudor clothing is that buttons are an endangered species. Instead, you rely on a dizzying array of ties, ribbons, hooks, and most perilously, straight pins. Pins are everywhere. They hold on collars, ruffs, cuffs, sleeves, bodices, veils, and the occasional accessory that simply can't be trusted to stay put on its own. The average well-dressed Tudor could be carrying upwards of 50 metal pins at any given time, turning a pleasant walk down the corridor into an obstacle course for both body and ego. Laces are next. Getting into a doublet, bodice, or pair of hose means threading and tying endless strings, each one needing just the right tension, lest your sleeve fall off. Or worse, you lose circulation in your left arm. For the ambitious, there are decorative laces too, bright, fluttering ribbons signaling that you're up to date with the latest fashion, or at least good at tying knots. The downside? All those dangling bits love to find door handles, chair arms, and even other people's accessories. If you've never had to unlace yourself from a neighbour's purse before dessert, you're not truly living the Tudor dream. Getting dressed is a team sport. Servants, siblings, and very patient spouses spend hours every week lacing up their loved ones, dodging errant pins, and reattaching sleeves that were never quite designed to stay on. There's no such thing as throwing on an outfit. It's more of an engineering project. Wrap, pin, tie, repeat, then check everything twice. Did you forget a pin? You'll find out. Usually when you sit down and discover it, pointy end up at the most inopportune moment. And moving is a hazard. Every doorway is a gauntlet, every staircase a test of nerve. One snag, and you might find yourself unravelling by the yard, leaving a breadcrumb trail of ribbons and fabric for the household to follow. Parties are even more dangerous. Crowded banquet halls packed with swinging sleeves, oversized ruffs, and at least 3 people who forgot to fasten their capes properly. Socializing is equal parts etiquette and self-defense, as you try to greet your friends without accidentally unpinning their dignity. Not to be outdone, the world itself conspires against you. House cats see all those ribbons as an invitation to chaos, pouncing at inopportune moments and sending pins scattering across the floor. Small children find endless entertainment in tugging at laces, while ill-placed furniture lies in wait to catch your trailing sashes. Even the wind, sneaking in through ill-fitting windows, loves to untie a bow or two, just to keep you on your toes. But pins and laces have their perks. They allow for a perfect fit, easily adjusted when you've had a little too much pie or need to sneak a snack into the theatre. Lose weight? Just tighten a lace. Gain a little? Loosen one up. No need for new clothes, just a new knot. And when fashion changes overnight, as it often does at the whim of the Queen, a strategic rearrangement of pins can turn last week's look into this week's trend. Still, every Tudor knows the risks. The gentle prick of a pin is the price you pay for status. The tug of a lace, the occasional wardrobe malfunction, these are badges of honor, proof that you've survived another day in one of history's most sartorially ambitious eras. So next time you curse your shoelaces or lose a button, think of the Tudors, valiantly battling their own clothing every step of the way. In their world, fashion didn't just hurt. It stabbed, it tangled, and it never let you forget who was really in charge. Not everyone can grow a beard worthy of a Tudor courtier. Luckily, this is the age of beard enhancement, where enterprising men stuffed, glued, or outright forged facial hair to keep up with the latest trends. From the dignified pointy triangle to the full-on wizard, facial hair was less about genetics and more about what you could convincingly attach to your own face. Shaving mishaps? Let's just say you learned to live with uneven sides and the occasional singed eyebrow. In Tudor England, a man's face was his calling card. While modern society lets you pick between 3-day stubble and maybe I'll just skip shaving until winter, Tudor fashion demanded commitment. A beard wasn't just facial hair, it was a declaration of power, wisdom, virility, and occasionally your willingness to risk mild adhesive poisoning. There were endless styles to choose from. The classic spade beard favoured by Henry VIII, the sharply sculpted pencil moustache for the foppish, or the intimidating biblical prophet for those seeking gravitas and plenty of personal space at banquets. Not blessed with robust follicles? No problem. Enter the world of the artificial beard, a booming industry for those who couldn't wait for puberty or simply lost the genetic lottery. Wigs for your face became surprisingly sophisticated. Some men used animal hair, often goat or horse, artfully shaped and dyed to match the colour of their remaining eyebrows. Others turned to human hair, purchased from those lucky enough to have more beard than sense. These facial additions were attached with everything from fish glue, as aromatic as it sounds, to wax and ribbons cleverly tucked behind the ears. If your beard slipped halfway through a conversation, the best you could do was feign sudden illness or invent a new style on the spot. The danger didn't stop at adhesives. Beard maintenance was a daily ritual, involving waxes, pomades, and for the especially ambitious, heated irons. These early beard stylers worked much like curling tongs. If curling tongs were made by blacksmiths and operated by people who believed burns were a sign of masculinity, the scent of singed hair mingled with the smell of roasted meat at many a Tudor dinner, adding a unique ambience to the proceedings. Growing a beard from scratch came with its own hazards. Razors were little more than sharpened knives, and mirrors were polished metal that showed a reflection somewhere between impressionist painting and crime scene. Shaving was an act of faith. Nick yourself and you'd slap on a bit of cloth, mutter a quick prayer, and hope you didn't bleed through your ruff. For those who prized a perfect line, barbers doubled as surgeons and dentists, ready to shape your beard or pull a tooth at a moment's notice. Of course, beard trends were as fickle as the weather. One week, the Queen might decide that neat, trimmed beards were the height of fashion. The next, a visiting ambassador arrives with a face full of wild whiskers, and suddenly everyone is scrambling to cultivate facial hair so vast it requires its own support structure. Peasants looked on in confusion, watching their social betters cycle between pirate and priest with bewildering speed. The competitive spirit didn't stop at beards. Moustaches curled into elaborate shapes, sometimes held in place with wire or tiny braids. Sideburns sprouted like decorative hedges. Eyebrows were left to fend for themselves, plucked, dyed, or ignored entirely. And if a beard mishap left you uneven, you'd simply turn your bad side away from the crowd and hope no one noticed. So next time you worry about patchy stubble or an unfortunate grooming accident, remember the Tudors. They lived in a world where beard envy was a national pastime, false moustaches were perfectly respectable, and masculinity was measured not by brawn, but by what you could glue to your face and still manage to eat soup. In Tudor England, flirting wasn't done with texts. It was accomplished with the strategic flash of an ankle or the subtle flourish of a jeweled girdle. Accessories weren't just decorative. They were part of a language only the fashionably fluent could understand. From clandestine glove exchanges to the slightly risque dropping of a handkerchief. Courtly love was a full-contact sport, played out in velvet, lace, and eyebrow-raising hats. Forget dating apps and romantic DMs. If you wanted to catch someone's eye in the 16th century, you had to know your way around a ruff and be ready to weaponize a fan at a moment's notice. Seduction, in Tudor England, was built on mystery, restraint, and a dizzying array of unspoken signals, many of which revolved around what you wore and how you wore it. Take the handkerchief, for example. Far from being just a handy tissue, it was a key tool in the romantic arsenal. Drop one artfully near your chosen target, and you might as well have sent a bouquet of red roses. If they picked it up and returned it, your feelings were acknowledged, at least in the eyes of the sharp-eyed matrons lurking in every shadow. A handkerchief pressed to the lips or blotted on a cheek carried secret meanings, turning every sneeze into a potential Shakespearean subplot. Gloves, too, had their own romantic vocabulary. To present someone with a glove was to offer a token of favour or affection, provided, of course, that the glove was in style and recently clean. The best-dressed nobles had entire drawers dedicated to embroidered gloves, perfumed and lined with velvet, ready to be gifted at the next feast or joust. Accepting a glove was a promise to remember the giver, at least until someone else offered a glove with a bit more gold thread or a more compelling perfume. Then there were the girdles and belts, more than just a way to keep your hose from falling down. Jeweled girdles, dangling with trinkets and lockets, were prime flirting territory. A lady might wear a particular charm or miniature portrait at her waist, carefully arranged to catch the eye of a suitor. Gentlemen sometimes reciprocated with gifts of pins, pomanders, or intricately decorated sashes, each one loaded with personal meaning and just enough ambiguity to keep the gossips guessing. Even the act of lacing and unlacing could be flirtatious. A glimpse of an embroidered stocking or the quick tightening of a bodice was enough to set hearts racing and tongues wagging. To the modern eye, it all seems like a lot of effort for a wink, but in a society obsessed with appearances and decorum, a little extra lace or a particularly daring garter could say more than 1,000 love letters. Hats, of course, played their part. A feather worn at a particular angle, a velvet cap tipped just so, or a plume borrowed from a lover's fan. These were all carefully calculated moves in the chess game of courtly affection. To lend your hat to another was an intimate gesture, one best done far from the prying eyes of chaperones and future in-laws. For the truly adventurous, accessories doubled as secret communicators. Lovers exchanged lockets containing hair, rings with coded inscriptions, or even decorative pins designed to deliver clandestine messages, often with just enough symbolism to make poets blush. Some couples devised entire systems, using the placement of a brooch or the color of a ribbon to signal everything from "meet me at midnight" to "your mother is watching." And while not every accessory-led romance ended in a happy marriage, many led to nothing more than a few verses of bad poetry or a scolding from a well-meaning aunt. The thrill of the chase was half the fun. Every feast, every dance, every carefully coordinated outfit was a fresh opportunity for intrigue. So, next time you fumble over a text or worry about your outfit on a date, remember the Tudors. For them, every ribbon, glove, and secret glance was a step in the intricate dance of seduction, proving that sometimes the best way to say I like you is with a little lace and a whole lot of nerve. Times, fashion really does come at a price. So tonight, as you settle into your clean bed, no ruff, no codpiece, no risk of accidental impalement by decorative pins, maybe take a quiet moment to appreciate just how far we've come. The Tudors survived the age of exploding collars, lead-based beauty routines, and the daily terror of accidentally committing a fashion crime punishable by law. Maybe you're wrestling with your own battles these days, tight jeans, scratchy tags, or the existential dread of laundry day, but at least your wardrobe hasn't tried to poison you, set you on fire, or cause an international incident just because you wore the wrong colour to dinner. Let's spare a grateful thought for the people of Tudor England. They faced rain, mud, lice, and the constant threat of being upstaged by someone with a slightly bigger feather in their hat. Their resilience, stubbornness, and complete disregard for personal comfort remind us that humans can get through just about anything, with enough layers, a sense of humour, and maybe a really supportive pair of hose. So, as you close your eyes tonight, know that history may be itchy, dangerous, and a little ridiculous, but it's also proof that people keep going, no matter what. Be proud of your pajamas, your plumbing, and your right to wear whatever you want, even if it's just socks with sandals. Sleep well, be grateful for modern comforts, and remember, you survived another day without ever once having to starch a ruff. That, my friend, is true progress. Good night.